Okay, it is 6:30 p.m. and it is Thursday, November the 8th, 2018, and I want to welcome each of you to J250 Drugs and Crime. For the next 6 weeks, I will be, or 5.5 weeks, I'll be your instructor. This quarter goes very, very fast. You will be surprised at how quickly that the quarter uh, will end. And I encourage you to so that you will understand the expectations about this particular course. It is a very interesting course. Um, the course developers and people who worked on it, friends of mine, colleagues, did a very good job. This used to be an 11-week course, and I have taught this 5.5 week course at least 2 times. This, I think, is my third time, but at any rate, this is a powerful course, power packed. There's a lot of emotion involved in this, a lot of knowledge, and we'll be dealing with issues as to how we deal with the drug problem and the correlation between drugs and crime, which some of you already who know me know what my position is on that, but I'll be elaborating more on it. So let's get right into the module so that I can go over the things to be expected. We got a lot of material to cover in the next hour and a half. You should be aware that the lectures will not be an hour and a half every week, but will be an hour or sometimes a little longer depending on the videos that are included in there. So anyway, at the top of the page, you will see my instructor information and my phone number. Many of you already know this, but I'll say it anyway. Read what it says under the instructor information. It says, students can feel free to call me, text me, or email me any hour of the day except the 25th hour of the day. And I remind you that APA and critical thinking are very important in the grading of all assignments. We have a rubric that goes with each assignment, and you want to pay close attention to the rubric because my grading is focused right around the rubric. I use that as a guideline. And so it's very important. I have students that will have a bad situation, and instead of calling me or texting me, they'll email me. But if I have something that's very urgent, or either there's something that you need to talk to me about, feel free to do it. It's very, very important, and I'm very open and available to helping you, as many of you know. And then I want to remind you, and this is in bold print, you'll find this here, and you'll also see it on the syllabus. You are required to conduct research for all papers. That means that the sole source should not be the textbook. If you do that, you will lose 2 points. And so we have tools that help you with your research. Helpful resources are listed down here. The Library and Learning Center resource, there's the writing guide, and then there's tutor assistance as well. Tutoring is not just for students who are having trouble. And then there are some articles that are copies you can click on going beyond the textbook to help you with a PDF document that will help you understand that. Analytical tips, information literacy, which we will talk about as one of the transferable skills, referencing, which deals with APA citations and references. The annotated bibliography, you won't have to worry about too much. Critical thinking is something that you should be familiar with. There's a course I know that either you have taken or will be taking on critical thinking, but if you copy and paste this link onto your, it helps you understand what we mean when we say that. And then, of course, there are rubrics, and the rubrics are relating to the written assignments. Now, in this particular course, the weekly written assignments are all labeled course project. And other than the discussion post, I'll show that to you in a minute. This is a reminder that this lecture, 6:30 today to 8 p.m. But beginning next week, every week, you'll have a lecture on Tuesdays, 6:30 to roughly 7:30, and sometimes they go a little longer. You must attend the lecture or listen to the archive. There'll be a keyword given, and you'll be required to give me that keyword in the drop-down so that you will receive your grade. Now, that keyword is going to be due the same day as your written assignments are due. As you already know, your written assignments are due on Sundays, except week 6 when we get to that, and that's a ways away, but you can get accustomed to Sundays, all right? And then your reply posts are generally due on Tuesday, and your initial post is due on Tuesdays, and your reply post on Saturday. Now, this first week is different. Why? Well, we're not starting until Wednesday. So you'll see the instructions given here. But I want to point out a few things. The writing process, you can take a look at that, and you can see the steps that have to do with writing, APA assistance. There's a guide. If you could click on that, that will help you to deal with the issue of APA. And then there is the welcome announcement, which all of you should be familiar with now, where I welcomes you to the course. And take attention to each of the bold things on here. Announcements, student lounge. Some of you have already looked at my student lounge post and have replied to it, so we can get to know each other. And then I sent you a welcome message, email, in the course mail. Make sure you check your course mail regularly. We also have student mail outside of the course, but we use for probably 90% of our communication the course mail. And be sure to pay attention to the syllabus, which covers academic integrity policy, attendance, late assignments, and so forth. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Your calendar is very important. We're also going to go over that as well. If you have some general course questions, these questions can be addressed by posting them in the general course questions section. And when you find the general course questions section, it is under the, when it says, if you go under the getting started, and you clicked on getting started, you will see your course schedule, welcome, and then there's a place for general course questions. Now, you can also access those under the discussions as well, the student lounge, and then it's general course questions. And when they post here, you can click on that. You will be able to provide information. Now remember, when you post that general course question, it's going to be something that all students will see. So you don't want to put personal information on there. If you want to have a question like that, you'll email me or text me concerning that. So again, continuing on down in the welcome announcement, we talk about the resources tab. Resources tab is found at the top right of your, there it is right there, all the way at the end, and you can click on that, and you can get valuable resources, Grammarly, and some of the other things that are already listed on your course homepage as well. Your grade book is your report tab, but make sure that you read the comments under the rubrics because that's where you get your information. And then these are some guides, again, to help you. This tells you again that the lecture today is 6:30 to 8 p.m. and that I will be giving expectations. It won't be like the normal lectures that take place 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 starting next week. Okay. If you have technical problems, please contact PSC. The phone number is given at the bottom of every page, even at the bottom of this page. There it is, right there. Okay, and you'll be able to find them, call them, talk to them about your technical problems, and then they will assist you to help you get those cleared up or guide you. All right. So now each week there will be a weekly announcement. And so let's look at one for this week. Psychoactive drugs, categories, effects on the body, and the classification of controlled substances. That's the topic of this week. You have chapters 1 and 2 of Drugs, Crime, and Justice, which is the textbook. And I also gave you the PowerPoints that you can utilize to make sure you have details on information that will help you. That's something in addition to help you. And I would pay close attention to those because they will help you prepare for the exams and the actual quizzes. And then this talks about the lecture today and telling you that beginning next Tuesday at 6:30 that we will have the live lectures. I encourage you to try to attend the live lectures if at all possible. Then your discussion assignment, classification of drugs and controlled substances. So note the deadline for the initial post and reply post is Saturday. That's only because of the first week. Your reply post will always be due on Saturdays, but your initial post starting week 2 will be due on Tuesday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Finally, complete the quiz, and it'll be due on Sunday, 11:59 p.m. And then reminder about what's taking place now. And then you'll see start strong. That's what I encourage you to do, and finish strong. And then my motto, adversity is a springboard to success. I will conclude today's session talking about what that means. And so that's it. But that's the process. So make sure you check your announcements. You'll find a lot of information on your announcements and in the calendar. So now let's take a look at the course calendar real quick, and then we'll go to the syllabus. Okay, course calendar. As you can see, we started class yesterday. The lecture is today. Your initial post and reply posts are due this Saturday. And then your quiz is due by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Now, this is a timed quiz. And what I recommend to students is that they study the materials during the course of the week, the reading material, the PowerPoints, and listen to the live lecture that will help you, and do the things in the module. There's some practice stuff that will help you to prepare for the exam. And so you want to do that. And then each week, and you can see how quickly, you see again that the next lecture will be the 13th, and then every week at the same time, okay? And then we go all the way through until December 14th. That's when the course ends. So the course is very quick, so you want to make sure that you stay on top of things and get your assignments in. If you run into a problem, let me know right away. Don't delay, okay? So now let's close down the course tools, and let's go to the syllabus where I'll spend some time. Again, these are things that I will not talk to you about every week, but I will start now. So your syllabus tells you the name of the course. It tells you the course number. It tells you my name, my phone number again, email. And it tells you, the same things I told you earlier on the course homepage, my notes. So you will see it there as well. It tells about what the course requires and all of those things. We're going to scroll on down. So the course will consist of readings. I've already kind of discussed that. Discussion assignments, quizzes. There'll be 5 quizzes throughout the course. Each quiz contains multiple choice questions and is timed. And then there will be 4 course project assignments. These are basically your written assignments that are weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you'll have 4 of those written assignments. And so you should be aware of the fact that that's it now. And each week, it's not a continuation of building up on one huge final project. Each week is independent and totally different. So next week, we'll get into the issues of weeks 2. I won't talk about that, but be aware that we will be discussing that as far as reminder letters. Again, there's my same information that you see down there. That's there again. So you have no excuse for not knowing that. Now, here's the grading breakdown. Discussions, 60 points or 10 points each week. 5 for initial post, 5 for reply post. 16.4% of your grade. Your quizzes, 75 points or 20.5 points. And I told you that you have those that take place on weekly, except the final week. There's a final exam. Course projects, you have 40 points, and you have 4 of those. So you want to do well on all of this. Then you get down to your final exam, which is 11%. Now, some students feel like, oh, wow, if I do well on the top part, I don't have to worry about the final. Not true. Not true. You don't want to start thinking like that. You want to start thinking because the final exam is going to cover the previous weeks of assignments and work and the materials that you had in each module to help you to prepare. And it's a time exam. Then, of course, your live lecture, submitted timely, the key word, you will get 5 points for each of the 6 weeks, starting with this one today, and then all the way through, for a total of 365 points. So that lets you get all of the points, and you'll end up with a perfect grade. Now, let me say this to you. Take a look at the grading scale and knowing where you are. Here's what I want to tell you. Anything below 80, don't ask me about how to get it. Don't ask me how to just pass my course. Don't ask me how to get a C, a D. You don't even have to ask me how to get an F. The point of the matter is I tell students I don't produce C students. I produce A students and B students. And I don't help students to become C students, because the reason is it's enabling you. You don't want to just barely pass, because remember, you're going to be in competition in the future for employment opportunities and maybe postgraduate work. And like I did, I went on to law school. I went on to seminary. I went on to get an MBA. All these things But what I did in undergrad had to be measured pretty high. And so you want to shoot for the dean's list. And if you don't get on the dean's list, shoot for the honor roll. And so in this course, my contribution to you is to help you along the way. I have never let a student down. Students will let themselves down. And I encourage you to utilize all the resources that I provide for you. If you have a question or an issue, reach out to me. Shame on you if you don't reach out to me, because I will be willing to help you. So let's understand from the beginning. I don't talk about C's, and I don't talk about D's, and I definitely don't talk about F's. And then these are the things that I do, and you can read that because I'm doing them now. So now let's take a few minutes and talk about something that this school has identified as what we call transferable skills. In other words, these are things that are important for students to have achieved success in attending school that actually is transferring over into your future employment opportunities. And we have been told by employers that this is what we're looking for. And not necessarily in the order that you see them, but all skills, employers focus on them in terms of determining whether they'll accept you or not, whether you will get a job or whether you will climb higher in the company or organization that you're in. And so every course that you take here at Rasmussen will have these built into the course. That's why some of the things that students will ask me, they will ask me, for example, and that goes to the issue of information literacy. And so anyway, the first transferable skill that is so critical and important is communication. You must be able to be proficient in not only oral communication, of course, absolutely, but your written communication. That's why we focus on critical thinking, which is the second issue. And we want you to be able to put down on paper in the language, English language, what it is that you're trying to convey to a person. We want you to be able to write it so that it can be utilized by others, read by others, to help them as well. And so communication is usually one of the first issues you're going to hear, no matter what area you go into in criminal justice. In fact, any field, but I'm focusing on criminal justice, communication. I used to teach a course that I hope they will bring it back, written and oral communication skills, and it was focusing around law enforcement officers, and it was focusing around pretty much correction officers. But anyway, the communication aspect is so very, very, very important. And then we get to critical thinking. You're going to hear me say that until you just hear it in your sleep. And I already showed you earlier on the course homepage how important it is. We encourage students to research, find the information and details for your papers, but to analyze it. One student asked me once, is critical thinking presenting my opinion? I said, well, that's a small portion of it, because you're not going to be graded on your opinion, but what you're going to be graded on is how you interpret and apply the issues that are placed before you in each of your written assignments. You're going to apply that in your employment situations where you're going to have responsibilities that are hoisted upon you and duties by your employer. So critical thinking is actually, that's my favorite one. I'm a natural critical thinker because I went to law school and I learned something called the Socratic method. And the Socratic method is how I get to answers. It involves a series of questions given to me until a light bulb comes on, and then I got it. Well, that's kind of a form of critical thinking. But if you want to know more about critical thinking, again, there is a video that is on your course homepage that you will be able to copy and paste and take a look at it. But it is very, 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 very important. We want you to run your papers through Grammarly and check the plagiarism box. If you have too much material from the sources that you found doing research and not enough critical thinking to offset that, you're going to get dinged with a bad grade because I'm going to deduct those points. We don't want to produce copier and pasters. We don't want to just provide individuals who know how to find stuff. We want you to be able to analyze it. We want you to be able to provide your spin on it or some information that you discovered from your research in your own views and what you feel. Again, I guess that's kind of like the opinion again, but critical thinking is so much more. In short, what critical thinking is you, the individual, being able to present points that may be in the material, and you may challenge those points and explain why you challenge those points or why you agree with those points. You're going to provide maybe some personal experiences that go with that or those kinds of things. Anyway, that's when you start to get into critical thinking. In other words, you're using the brain here to be able to break down the materials. Digital fluency. Everything is digital. Our textbooks are digital. I am 68 years old. I went through college, law school, without digital stuff. I went through seminary. When I got into years later, in 2003, I went back for a fourth degree at 53 years old. I was faced with dealing with digital stuff. And so everything is digital. You learn that because, you know, here I am online here. I'm teaching online courses. I never had any online courses. I never, even when I first started to work at Rasmussen in 2011, I was teaching residentially, and it was until I think 2013 or late 2012 that I started getting on board of that. But digital fluency is here. You're using all kinds of technical resources. Almost everybody I know has one of these things here. They have Android, they have Apple, they have iPads, Android pads, and you got so many different resources, and laptops, desktops, and so forth. Those laptops are more prevalent now than desktops. So anyway, we want you to be fluent in that. Diversity. You're going to work and come into contact with people from different backgrounds, and you're going to have to learn to respect and deal with those. Lord knows that we're in an era right now where our diversity is being challenged, and especially in this country, you're going to meet people from different walks of life, different sexual preferences, different religious beliefs, speak different language, approach things in a way that their culture is totally different from what but you have to learn to respect those individuals, and you're going to have to learn to apply those. You're going to be working on teams that involve teamwork, and you're going to have individuals come from different points of views. For example, there are conservatives. There are individuals who are very liberal. Then there's ultras of each, ultra-liberals, ultra-conservatives. The point of the matter is that you can agree to disagree. The point of the matter is you still want to respect those individuals, whether you're Democrat, Independent, Republican, or whatever else. And so very, very, very important. Our country is made up of immigrants, and people are from all parts of the world and bring their cultures. I've been fortunate enough to be able to have operated seriously with the Jewish culture, learned a whole lot about it. I've learned a lot about people from various parts of the Middle East, where I've had to interact, and a whole lot of Spanish-speaking people, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, people are from other parts, Latin America and South America and other parts of the world. And people who speak languages like Polish that I have no clue what they're saying, but I get help. The point of the matter is that I respect those individuals. And so teamwork. Ethics. We need to operate with ethical principles, especially in criminal justice. You will discover, and you will hear me if you've had me in other courses, you will hear me particularly if you take criminal law, which is J250 with me. I used to teach a course, Ethics in Criminal Justice, and I talk about the importance of following the procedures and policies of your department, operating where you are going to be, how should I say, able to do the right thing. If you, for example, in law enforcement, you're not going to deal with the code of silence. You're not going to deal with those kinds of things. You're not going to find yourself in situations like a few people that I'm aware of, law enforcement, who have written reports to match up with their partner, and then the videos come out and it shows the difference, and they're both in trouble. So, and get charged with issues where there are actually felonies with submitting false reports. Ethics is so important. We start, though, with ethics here in school, and I always say this: if you're an unethical student, you're going to be an unethical professional. If you're an unethical professional, your career is going to be short-lived, and you will end up in some place that you don't want to end up. Sometimes it's behind bars. And so ethics are very, very, very important. In all the opportunities and occasions and situations, do what is right. Don't rationalize. Don't try to use shortcuts. Do what is right. Professional responsibilities, all organizations. As a lawyer, we had professional responsibilities. We used to even have this thing that said we don't even want you to give the appearance of impropriety, even if it's not improper. Conflict of interests and things of that nature. Utilizing your position because you're a law enforcement officer over someone, or using it for a perk. Everybody's entitled to be respected. So your organization, as we do here at the college, we as instructors have responsibilities that we must abide by and follow. And I tell you, my job is to produce ethical, professional, and educated criminal justice professionals. That's my goal at all times whenever I'm teaching. Sometimes I'm accused of being difficult and hard, but you'll appreciate it. Yours truly has been through those things, and we'll be talking about those a little later. The point of the matter is that they build character in individuals. They help you to become very good, and will help you to elevate yourself in your chosen profession. And then the final one is information literacy. I kind of alluded to that earlier. You'll be able to find information, recognize credible sources. Listen to me and hear me good. Do not ever use Wikipedia. Do not rely on Wikipedia for any of your written assignments. You will see it in the rubric, but I'm saying it up front. So if a student says, "Well, I didn't know," just take time and listen to what I am saying. Do not use Wikipedia or other resources that might be stacked. You have to get some credible resources, research source resources. And the Library and Learning Center, that we have here doesn't provide any resources that are not credible. All are credible, and you can find yourself using them. And there's a lot of statistics and numbers that you will be able to find in those places. So you'll have a chance to demonstrate these skills throughout the course. The attendance policy I want to talk about is the late assignment policy. Now, I have students that sometimes say to me, well, what's the policy on late assignment? It's right here in the syllabus. You'll have up to 7 days after a deadline to submit assignments. Now, listen to me good. That means that for each day that your assignment is late, you lose 10% of that grade. Now, listen to me. Up to 7. Now, think about what I'm getting ready to say. Here we are. Your assignment's on time. It's a good assignment. It satisfied all the requirements, so you get 100. But you submit it on Monday instead of that Sunday when it's due. Then most you can get is a 90. Submitted that Tuesday, you get an 80. Submitted that Wednesday, you get a 70. By the time you get to that Thursday, which is the 4th day, you've already reached a point where you fail. And so if you get to 5 and the 50s, you're out of the water. So my point being, it says it gives you up to 7 days. However, it really isn't 7 days. What does that mean? Get your assignments in on time. Now, discussion posts operate differently as far as the way I grade them. Discussion posts need to be on time in order to get all of your points and the content as demonstrated in the rubric. And many of you have already had me know already how I grade. I will let you know why you lost points and you need to fix them. Now, you should be aware that as a general rule, initial posts are due on Tuesdays. I already told you this week that your discussion posts are due Saturday for this week. But after this, only your reply posts will be due on Saturday, and your initial posts will be due on Tuesday. And you'll see that if you look at the announcements and the calendar and so forth and so on. You should also be aware that your discussion posts, if you submit your discussion posts on Sunday, you're going to get a 0 for discussion posts because the discussion forum has ended and you won't get any credit. Now, but here's something that I do for my students, and this is something that I do. If you submit your discussion posts on time or late, but before the time ends, I will subtract the number of points. Your initial post and discussion and your reply post can be done the same day every week if you want to. But if you do, you're going to end up losing points, at least 4 points. If your discussion post is submitted, your reply post is submitted on Sunday, hear me, you will lose a point. However, if you submit your discussion post, which is your initial post and reply post on Sunday, no deals. You don't get any points at all for that because the forum has ended. So you've got to get a clear understanding of that, is that posts made after the due date in the current week or module will not be accepted. I'll put in there that they're good, but then the end result is that you won't get points for them, and that's the key thing. Now, what I'm about to say next does not apply to discussion posts. It applies to written assignments. I have the ability to waive the penalty or time frame in the case of extenuating circumstances for your written assignments. Did you hear me? Make sure you get that. But how am I going to know what circumstances are extenuating? I know extenuating circumstances, and so should you. But when you, and I'm not going to give you examples, but you should be able to recognize what is extenuating circumstances, something that has stopped you from completing the assignment. Don't tell me my um, time management was bad. That's not extenuating circumstances. I had to work overtime on my job. That's not extenuating circumstances. Those are things that are not. Your child got sick and you had to address that child, or you were sick. That's extenuating circumstances. Someone, you lost a loved one, and please don't tell me attached is a copy of the obituary and or a note from the doctor. You're college students. I don't need that. And remember what I said earlier about ethics. I believe that you would not make it up. And if you are someone who feels like, okay, he's a softie, I got over, trust me, and I mean what I say and I say what I mean, it will catch up with you. Somewhere, somehow. We instructors do communicate with each other. And we look at, and I can tell what other courses that you take. I know how to look that up and find that information. And I can communicate with the instructor and ask them. I say, hey, is such person, doing the same thing? And it says, no, they told me that the reason they didn't get their assignment in is that someone in their family died. And I say, well, they didn't tell me that. They told me that they were sick. So guess what? Boom, you're shot out of the water. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. And don't take advantage of the circumstances. And please, don't look at me and say, okay, I got a lot of students that I'm teaching. But trust me, I remember situations. I remember a lot of you guys because I have a photographic memory. I remember your names, and I also remember some things about you. I either remember you pretty much because you were a really good student, or I remember you because you didn't perform, and or you tried to come to me. Don't come to me in week 4 or week 5 and say, can I submit the assignments from week 1, 2, and 3? I'm going to say, no, you cannot. You can't do that. Because actually week 3 is midterm. It's just like when you had 11 weeks. When you got to week 5, you couldn't submit the assignments. Week 6, rather, you couldn't submit the assignments 1 to 5, except in extenuating circumstances. All right? So be aware of that. Okay? And under no circumstances can a student submit work after the last day of the term, unless the incomplete grade has been requested. I will grant it based upon the policies, and I'm pretty good about that. But don't bank on that. Don't bank on it. Don't bank on it. And I'm not even going to tell you have a right to that. I'm just telling you that's what the material here says. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the academic integrity policy, but I am going to tell you to take time to recognize and read it. And all it really means is that you're going to operate ethically. I don't know that when you're sitting here in the lecture that you're not just logging in and going off and doing other things. I don't know that. And I'm not going to be trying to figure that out, but I have ways of knowing, even if you're logged in. You could be caught off guard because I will ask questions, and I will ask for answers, even if it's just one person there. If that person doesn't answer, then I will think that that person is not paying attention, but is just logged in. And so the point of the matter is, I will ask periodically, are there any questions? Again, the point of the matter is just remember, I know the information. You want the information. You need to know the information. You're paying good money for the information. Take advantage of it. I never ever had cheat or any of those things to be a part of what I did, and I was successful even under adverse situations. So that's the syllabus. So now let's take a look at Module 1 real quick. We got about 45 minutes more to go. Notice I was talking to you about research. In this course, we have a drugs and crime guide. If you click on this, and I'll just click on it today, you'll find it. It's very, very helpful. There it is. It tells you about things. It tells you about your Module 1 assignments. Okay, and then, you know, if I run Adobe Flash, it's a video, and I'm not going to look at it. I'm going to let you it's there, finding newspaper articles and things like that. There are things that we have taken time explaining the course project, the research project, the basics. It's only a 2.5-minute video. And so you want to take advantage of looking at those things. It tells you about the APA guide and things of that nature as well. Okay, so let's go back to where we were. And so you can click on that, and it'll help you with your coursework. Every week, there's the assignments tab, and it tells you what your assignments are. All right, and you see that there, and you know the rules about when it should be submitted. This week's differently. Your quiz is a 30-minute quiz. 30-minute quiz. You'll have one opportunity to submit this. It's timed, and then you agree to abide by the academic misconduct policy set forth in the syllabus, which I told you to take time to read. And it could result in you being expelled. How do we know if you're doing it? Oh, trust me, we could tell. If a person, for example, has these number of questions, multiple choice questions, and you go through and you find yourself doing only 1/3 or 1/4, that's because you're trying to find the information or you have the information in front of you. Now, you should do it the same way as if you were sitting in the room with me and I said, put your books away and paper, and then you take that quiz. And that's the way you should do it. Live lecture as well. Okay. And that's your assignments for week 1. You'll notice that there is no written assignment outside of the discussion post and the quiz for week 1. All right. So now let's go into the content, which I'm just going to touch. I will not touch in detail today because of the fact that we have other things I want to make sure I go over with you. Each week, the objectives are there. The assignments are replicated. Controlled Substance Act, Controlled Substance Act activity, narcotics, amphetamines, cocaine, and marijuana, synthetic drugs. And then there's the project introduction. These are things. And then there is the quiz. So now let's show you each week. So the Controlled Substances Act, I'm not going to talk about that too much, but this explains the Controlled Substance Act, helps you in addition to your materials, and also will help you with your exam. And talks about what drugs are Schedule 1 drugs, Schedule 2, Schedule 3, Schedule 4. And if you pay it close attention, it says here, chemicals with no currently accepted medical use and a high potential of abuse. These are Schedule 1 drugs. Heroin, LSD. Except marijuana is changing. It's on its way off of Schedule 1, and you know why. Because it's being legalized in many jurisdictions. Ecstasy and peyote, these are mind-altering drugs, but they're not used for medicine. When you get down here, these can be abused, but they're some of them they're used for medication, uh, Vicodin, methamphetamine, no, cocaine, no, methadone, yes, diazepam, Demerol, oxycodone, and so forth and so on. You're going to hear more about these as we go on. And then as you get down to 3, you see these are low potential drugs, such as Tylenol with codeine and other things, steroids. All the way down to 4, when you get into some Valium and things of that nature, Tramadol, and 5, where lower potential of 4, and then so these drugs are usually used for medical purposes, but sometimes people abuse them. And then there's the Controlled Substance Act. So each week I will be discussing these issues, but not today. This is a little review to help your understanding to match the drug. So if you, for example, I know you just started, you want to look at, and if you look that up here, then you want to know what is peyote. Peyote is what schedule would you say? You can type it into the chat box. I'll see it. What is it? Is it schedule 1, 2, 3, 4? Which one? What is it? There it is. Schedule 1. And then you go on, and then you see going down to Valium. Is that a 4? Yep. PCP. Yep. So then, yeah. So that's how you do it. And then you go to the next one, and you do the same thing. And that helps you to learn the schedule. So that's something that you can utilize yourself each week. Then there is some materials here to help you. If you open these up, it'll elaborate and provide you with more information on what are narcotics, what is amphetamine, what is cocaine, what is marijuana, and those will help you. Then we start talking about synthetic drugs. We're going to talk a lot about that during the course of the next few weeks, and you're going to learn about that. So now we come to the course project. So you understand, remember what I told you. This is not the same as when you're in other classes. And we're going to deal with issues relating to opioids, opiates. We're going to deal with all kinds of various drugs, heroin and opioids, and how they work. You're going to conduct research each week, starting with week 2 through week 4. Week 2, 3, and 4. And you're going to, those projects are going to be approached in different forms or fashions. You'll see as you come. So starting week 2, the question is, it says the course project is divided into 5 parts. Well, actually, it's 4 parts, but the final part of the course project is due in week 5. So week 2, what is heroin? Week 3, heroin and crime. We're going to be talking about that during the lectures each of those weeks. Heroin, opioids, law enforcement perspectives. Okay. Let me see. you said hard time with the chat. Make sure you do it publicly. Uh, you also wanted to talk about class versus drugs. What about Imodium, individuals that are using that drug? Well, again, yeah, we're going to cover that in weeks to come, but we're not going to cover that that today. So, but you want to, if you, you know, one of the things about this class, I always tell students that you will learn your research will help you. And these are some of the things that are on there. And if you find that there's some drugs that aren't mentioned in there, you can include those in your written assignments as well. Does that answer your question? Okay. Well, what is your question? You want to know what we're gonna what I think about individuals using Imodium? Is that what you're asking me? Okay, I don't see you typing anything in there. Okay, first of all, number one, and be aware of the way that this course is set up. What you need to be aware of is that in this first week, the first week there's no written assignment for the particular drug, but it will tell you what those drugs are. So you could go and do some research, and this is what we tell students in this course. That's what this course is designed to do, is to help you with your research skills. I just talked about that, information literacy. Um, Imodium, what is Imodium? What does it do? What is it intended for? How is it that individuals are using? There's some examples of information. You're going to find out that when we get into your written assignments, and if you look at your discussion posts for this week, you could do some research and provide that information as part of your discussion post to provide the answers to that. But my spin is to make sure that each of you understand that there are some commonly used drugs. Every one of them is not in there, and there are going to be some different ones, and they're not out of order. So, for example, if you're dealing with the issue of your assignment here, I'll go back to the discussion, classification of drugs and controlled substances. That's the place where you have the opportunity right now to go and do some research on Imodium and then provide that in your discussion post so that it will open up a dialogue between your students, and I'll see it, and yourself. You will learn that information. You got it? You see what we're doing here? Okay. So the discussion post, that is an exact issue that fits perfectly with this week's discussion assignment. Okay. But I know what you're talking about. I know exactly what you're talking about. But I want you to provide me and your classmates with the information about it. There's a lot of information out there about that. Okay. All righty. That's a good question, though. I like it when students come up with things that are not in here because of the fact that that's the beautiful part about drugs and crime, is that almost anything. Just like basic cough syrup, that there are individuals who utilize cough syrup and they will sell it and they will make money on it and they will get people hooked on it and that kind of thing. It's really, really, really something. But you're going to discover when we go through some of these sessions here, Imodium's going to pop up. I already know where it is. But you anyway, you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll see, and you'll see how it fits within it. So anyway, back to so you get the essence of the assignment. So each week, what is heroin? Heroin and crime. You're gonna deal with that, and I'll be lecturing about that. So each of these weeks, starting in 2, 3, 4, and 5, I will be lecturing about these issues and providing information that will help you to complete your assignment. Remember this week, there is no written assignment for you. Only issue is your discussion post. That's why I directed you back to the discussion assignment to be able to provide that information. It'll be good to see that. I'm going to be looking for it too, since I know you raised the issue. All right? So now each of these requirements for the course project, because like I said again, students get in their mind when they hear the word course project, then they begin to think in terms of, I have to build upon it. No, you're not going to build upon it. What you're going to do is each week is independent. You are kind of, because first you're going to just tell what is heroin. Then once you know that, then you're going to relate it to crime. Trust me, you're going to learn in this course, and here's a statement I will make up front. There is a strong correlation between recidivists or individuals who commit crime and drug use or drugs. And I say use or drugs, so that gets into use and or distribution. And we're going to be talking about that in weeks to come. In all the years that I was a police officer, I was a prosecutor for a short period, but I was primarily a defense attorney. I can tell you that almost all of the people that I know who committed crimes, particularly I'm not talking about the rapes, because I didn't do a lot of rape cases. I wasn't into representing individuals in rape cases because of some things that you'll learn about me in a minute. But anyway, the point of the matter is that almost every property crime and some violent offenses come about because individuals are trying to get what they need for their habits. Now, with these assignments, each part of the course project, you must include a minimum of 3 credible resources. Again, this is just a summary of it. Each week, I will be going over that with the rubric. You cannot, I see that, use your book as a reference on any part of the course project because we want you to use research. You cannot use Wikipedia. I already talked about that because it's not a credible source. You may include pictures in your paper, but it's not required. I've had students that have some really dynamite pictures, but make sure that you satisfy the content. So notice what it says. In week 1, you do not have an assignment to submit for the course project, but you began reading and doing research to learn more about the heroin epidemic. So that's a big, humongous issue. And then it tells you what you're going to deal in Module 2. We'll deal with that next week during the lecture, and so forth, week 3, week 4, and then week 5. Okay? And it says, I'll provide you with grading criteria. Yes, that's the rubric. So that's how it works. That's the way this course is going to be. So do you have any questions about week 1? Okay. All right. So now, having said that, I'm going to go back into the classroom. And I want to say this to you and each of you that for the next, I'm going to say maybe 30 minutes or so, or maybe less, I want to share something with you. You will discover under each announcement that there is a Stephanie. Um, have you had another class with me? You have not. Okay. Well, good. There's a lot of students in class who have had me, and they already know this scenario. But I want to talk to you about something. What campus are you? Where are you? What state are you? Oh, okay. All right. I won't fail you because you're in Green Bay. You're probably a Packer fan. Uh, I am a diehard Bear fan, but that's okay. I'm. I gotta, oh, you're not a Packer fan? Okay. Do you like football or who's your team? I'm messing with you right now, just having fun. Oh, okay. Now you didn't just say that because you wanted to earn some points here, uh, did you? Uh, okay, because we're talking about ethics right off the bat. Okay, go Bears. Okay, and so I'm a diehard Bear fan. Walter Payton was a personal friend of mine, as a matter of fact, and I have a Super Bowl Bears ring, which I don't have it on right now, from Super Bowl 20. That's a replica of Walter's ring. But anyway, go Bears. So anyway, wow, you must have fun up there doing football season. Oh, William Perry, I had dinner with him. I did in New Orleans in '86. Yeah, yeah. I never seen a man eat so much food in my entire life. I mean, this is how he talks. What y'all gonna eat? I'm gonna eat all this food up, and you all gonna have to find something else. That's how that's how the refrigerators talk. But yes, okay. Number 72. Number 72. I have a number 72 jersey. So, but anyway, uh, go Bears and Mr. Trubisky and boom, and Bears are number one right now. So, but anyway, I digress. Uh, that's right. No, he wasn't called her. No, he honestly earned that name. I can tell you. Yeah, he William the Refrigerator Perry. Yeah, the fridge is what they called him. But yeah, he was he was something else. He's still alive. He's sickly now, but yeah, Clemson graduate, and like I said again, he scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl, in Super Bowl 40, spiked the ball and all that stuff. But so anyway, so let me tell you this. In my profile, in there, I mentioned the fact that adversity is a springboard to success is my motto. So let me tell you this story so you understand where I'm coming from. You're looking at a man who, or listening to a man who, when he was 7 years old, his dad, who loved baseball, he loved the White Sox, so I'm a Sox fan because of that. He took me to Sox Park, Memorial Day of 1957, and we came home that day, and I had five younger sisters at that time, and I was living on what's called the west side of Chicago, Lawndale. It was originally a Jewish community, but it had started to change over by about this time. And so anyway, my dad, um, um, well, we were put to bed, and we all had in one bedroom. My five younger sisters and me had, and they were at the foot and head of bunk beds and so forth. Well, a fight broke out that ended up in the room. And a man who rented a room from us and my dad were tussling, and the light was flicked on, and the man got my dad into a corner, pinned him in the corner, took out a knife, and stabbed him right up here in the forehead. And I remember today like it happened then, because I have a photographic memory, that the blood was pouring out of this man's face, this knife. And the guy ran out of the house. Then the police came. They took my dad away on a stretcher. And I'll never forget that when they carried him out, my head was at the door where they carried him out in the bed. And I saw his eyes open, and he was just bloody. So they took him out, and then a few days later, the man who stabbed my father to death was back in the house. Well, it turns out that I found out years later that my mom and this guy were carrying on, and that was what the whole thing was all about. My father confronted him, and that resulted in him dying. The person who cut on the lights was my mother. The case was dismissed because they said they didn't have any evidence against this man. And my mother, as it turned out, who was in love with this guy, said that my dad was the one who was the aggressor, and that wasn't true. But anyway, the case was, and you'll learn in legal terms, nolli pros, which means it wasn't prosecuted. So guess what happened is the guy ended up living in the house with us, openly sleeping with my mother. And I had to live in the house with this man. For the next, let's see, I was 7 up until I was 12 years old in that house. This man subjected my mother to so many forms of domestic violence that he used to beat her, that her face was disfigured. He actually stabbed her one time in the chest, and he went to jail, but she went back and got him. So if you ever take the course Domestic Violence, which I taught, it talks about the cycle of abuse and all of that. I lived that. I grew up in that from that period of time. By this time, my mother had another child, 2 children by this man also. So therefore, I had 7 younger sisters. So by the time I was 12 years old, we left the area over there because it was pretty bad. The gangs were out there. The gangs didn't bother me, though, because it was an unusual situation, because they knew the story of what happened with my dad, and they agreed. Listen to me. The gangs at that time had some sense. They agreed that I should be preserved and should not be included in any of that stuff. And they used to always tell me if something was going down, get away from it. So anyway, I lived in that area, but my mother nevertheless moved from the area, and we moved into Indiana from Illinois in the west side, Gary, Indiana, which at that time was a pretty nice area. We lived in a nice community. In fact, about 4, maybe 5 blocks, maybe 6, there were these kids who used to always be out in this yard on Jackson Street, which was near where I live, whose last name were Jackson. Yes, that's right. That's who it was. And so it was a nice community. It was a nice area. We had Little League and all those things. Well, in 1962, my mother bought this restaurant, and she would go to the restaurant all the time. And so this guy, by the way, didn't beat her when we moved there at the house there, because an aunt came and stayed with us for several months, and she carried a gun. So it was a bad scenario altogether. And so anyway, finally she left around April or May of '63. And then Memorial Day of 1963 comes, and my mother tells me, take care of the kids and everything. So I was 13 at that time. I just made 13, May 3rd of 1963. So here's Memorial Day of 1963. She leaves, and we had people over. We had barbecue at the house and everything. So it goes into late that night. I clean up the house and everything, put everybody to bed, and I go to bed in my own bedroom at this time. So then all of a sudden, I wake up and there's smoke in the house, and it was almost daylight. And I open the door, and when I opened the door, I saw the car that my mother had pull off. So then I went and looked in her room, and her bed hadn't been slept in. So wasn't unusual because I would be in charge a lot, and she would be gone. Sometimes she'd stay all night at the restaurant or whatever else she did. So it wasn't a big deal. So as the day went on, all of a sudden, as we were going along with our day, two gentlemen came to the door, identified themselves as police officers, and said, could they come in? I told them no. They said, yes, we need to come in. So I said, okay, come on in. I let them in. Well, they announced to me, as the oldest one, that my mom had been found dead in Chicago. And I started yelling this man's name. His name was Webster Scott. I said, Scott, Scott, Scott. I just lost it totally. And so when that happened, I had to quickly get grips on myself because my baby sisters they were like, some of them didn't understand it, but some of them did because we were like almost stair-step. But the baby, she didn't understand, of course, at all. So anyway, she was still being taken care of by my mother, diaper changes and all of that stuff. So anyway, it was bad. So here we are, 8 kids, no mother and no father now. So we were forced to go back to Chicago and stay with an aunt, my mother's sister. She didn't want us there, and they were trying to decide where were they going to send us, and they were going to split us up. And we stayed for a full year in '63, and then an aunt came, the same one who came earlier and stayed with us. She came and said, I'm going to take all of the kids. And she had a house built in the south, further south in Chicago, in an area called Morgan Park, and we all moved into that house. And when we began living there, my problems weren't over. I was 14 years old, and I would first of all have an encounter with my uncle, who was my aunt's husband. He wanted me to take his name. I says, no, I don't want to take your name. I says, because I want to keep the name, carry it on, because I was the only one who would carry the name on because the girls would get married. Well, anyway, we had conflicts. So I, was just, it was problematic for me there. And I used to leave the house, and I would go visit friends and stay away. And then my aunt, of course, she knew where I was, and I would come home. But I would spend a lot of time away from home. But I did find out when I was 14 that the man pled guilty who killed my mother and had killed my father before, and that they sentenced him to 10 years. But someone brought to my attention that 10 meant 5 because of good time, good behavior. And they further brought to me that because he pled guilty, that if he behaved himself in prison, they would chop off 1.5 years from his sentence. And he would thus serve what he ultimately ended up serving was 3.5 years. I was so troubled, guys. This didn't seem right. And when I get troubled, I started to ask a whole lot of questions. And I get on a lot of people's nerves, especially relatives. When I'd ask questions, they didn't want to hear me. But someone finally brought to my attention, and they said to me, well, that's just the way it is. That's the law. I said, the law? What do you mean the law? And they explained to me about the legal system. And I said, well, who's in charge of that? They said, these people called attorneys or lawyers. So I went to school, a 14-year-old kid. Now, you got to remember, at that time, 14-year-old kids don't look like 14-year-olds now. I actually was a little kid. And I went to the librarian at my grammar school, and I asked a question about a book. I said, "Do you have any books on lawyers or attorneys?" She said, "We have one book." I said, "May I check it out?" I checked that book out, took it home, stayed up that night, and read that book cover to cover. The next day, anybody I met, I didn't care if I didn't know you. I said, "My name is Richard Wright, and I'm going to be a lawyer." When I did that, I thought I would get support from the family, but I did not. Everybody kept telling me how difficult the challenge that because of my where I came from and who my parents were and all of that, that I didn't have what it took. Even my aunt, the one that we stayed at her house temporarily, she was really dogmatic. She says, "You should try to do something else." She says, "Because you're aiming too high." And the aunt I was living with, she said, "Well, why don't you try something different?" And everybody was kind of like coming up against me. But here's how I am, guys, when those kind of things happen. I did not disrespect anybody. I just listened to them, and then I made my own decision and choice. And so I spent time meeting people in the community. I spent a lot of time at the local church, in the youth group. I spent time with doing babysitting and all kinds of things. I took a job at McDonald's. I had a paper route. And so I did all of these different things. In the meantime, I found myself in a situation where I was just at a loss. So I heard this lady on the radio, and I liked her voice, and I went and found her, and I boldly asked her to be my mother. She didn't know me. I just heard her on the radio. We became friends, and then, of course, I'm going to spin ahead years and years and years and years later. From when I was 14 when I met her, she ended up legally adopting me. But that was 34 years old. There's a whole nother story. But anyway, I went through some challenging times, guys. I'll show you one of the challenges I had. My aunt and uncle that I was living with, they illegally adopted me. I did not know this. I didn't even find this out until I was 34 years old. I had gone through with my name, but my name had been taken away illegally. But I graduated, got married to my first wife, had kids, and all that. They were last name Wright, but that wasn't the legal name that I had. I'd find out when I was 34. But here's what I'm going to tell you that happened to me that was a real challenge from the beginning with these people, in addition to what I told you. The church came forth and told my aunt and uncle that they were willing to give me a 4-year scholarship to a 4-year institution, no expenses to be paid by them. All they had to do was sign. They said, "I'm not signing." They refused to sign. It wouldn't have cost them 1 red cent. It was really my uncle who said, "He's not going to take my name. He's disrespected me, and I'm not." And they even tried to explain to him. They said, "He's not doing it out of disrespect. He's just trying to carry his dad's name on." Anyway, the point of the matter is that I didn't know that even at that time that my name had been changed. So they kept that from me. So anyway, I decided, I went on and graduated from high school, went to stay with some friends of mine for a little while. The friends of mine that I was staying with, they had a family member, a friend, who had was a secretary in a big Jewish law firm in Chicago, and got me a job to work in their mailroom. So I took the job working in the mailroom. At the same time, I registered for night classes at a junior college. Within a year after doing that, I got married, and then I ended up starting to live in my own apartment. I wasn't making a whole lot of money, but I got married, and then here comes the first child. Here comes the second child. Those children are 47 and 46 years old. And so anyway, I ended up doing that. But at the law firm, I let them know the same way I was with everybody else. And as a result, I became a file clerk in the law firm. Then I became a law librarian in the law firm. And then they found out I knew how to do research because I taught myself how to do research. I became a law clerk, which they call now today a paralegal. I used to go to meetings. I'd go to court, and I'd sit down. I learned how to write briefs and memos and all of that. I learned how to do legal research and all of that. In the meantime, I'm making my way through school. No car. On the bus. I had to be at work in the morning at 8:30. I'd get off of work at 4, had to be in class at 4:30. And I'd run across the other side of the downtown Chicago with these 2 arms full of books. The law firm was nice. They gave me a document carrier so I can carry my books. But that's what I did. And then I ended up, and I stayed on the dean's list, by the way, guys, even with all of that. And so I ended up finding myself reaching the point where I got accepted at a 4-year institution, Roosevelt University, and decided I would study political science, and I did. And I ended up finding it was time to take the LSAT and get ready for law school. The LSAT was a challenge, but my grades and everything were good. And so I decided that I was going to Northwest University School of Law. And I was told that that was going to be a tough thing for me to do. Well, I ended up finding myself in a situation where I really had nobody to encourage me. Now, the lady that I said that would become my mother later, she was in my life, but she had no power or authority. She was just a good friend. She was at my graduation from high school. She was at my graduation from college. And so anyway, I said, I'm going to apply to Northwestern. Now, the application was about 6 pages. But when I sent my package over and I asked one of the lawyers who taught there at the law firm, would he take my package over? It was in a big box. It was like a really big box. I had all kinds of writing exhibits. I had written my story in more detail than I'm telling you now about what I went through. And my ability to be able to communicate was demonstrated in my writing. So they got the package at Northwestern, and then they called me and said that we don't do personal interviews, but we want to see who is behind this package. And they invited me and set up a time for me to come to the campus. And so I took them up on it and went there, and they took me in a room, and there were four people. It was a female and 3 guys, and they sat me in there and asked me questions about that package, and I explained to them. It seems like it was about an hour or so, or maybe 45 minutes. Anyway, at the end of that, they went and they met among themselves, and one of them came back and says, well, we don't make offers in these kind of situations. They said, but what we will say to you is this, and this was in 1975. They said, we like what we see, we like what we heard, we are excited. We will be sending you some correspondence in the next few weeks that I think you'll like. Well, that was their way of just informally telling me. And then I got a letter 2 weeks later, welcome to Northwest University School of Law, the class of 1978, which would be 3 years after the 75. So I ended up getting accepted at the law school. I graduated from Roosevelt University with a degree in political science with honors. So I ended up getting to law school. Well, first thing I found out is that I couldn't work in the first year. They didn't have, they want you to give all your time because it was a very, very, very rigorous curriculum. So I ended up going on and starting to take those classes. Well, the person I was married to at that time had graduated in 75, and she was a teacher. So she was working to carry the load while I was in school. So in the meantime, we had two kids at that time. One's 47 and one's 46. So anyway, found myself in a situation where, for the first time in the history of Chicago public schools, the teachers went on strike. We lost all the income. There was no other income. And it was so much pressure on me that I decided I was going to leave. And I told one of my law professors that I was, Joyce, her name was Dr. Joyce Hughes, that I was going to take a leave, come back after things are better. She says, before you do that, come to my office. I want to sit down and talk with you. So she did. She said, have a seat. And then she stood in front of the door, which was the only exit and entrance to the room. She says, I'm going to tell you right now that I'm not moving from this door until you tell me and mean it that you're going to work this thing out. I will help you as much as I can. I can't help you financially, but I will be there to support you. So I took her up on it. And so, of course, 3 years later, I graduated from the law school with my law degree, which you saw the picture in the student lounge of me getting my law degree. It was an achievement and an accomplishment for me, but it was some tough times. So in between that, for example, I told you we lost income. We didn't have money to pay for electricity. So guess what? I had to study under candlelight. I studied by candlelight. We ate beans and out of can, and it was sardines and Vienna sausage. It was really something. And so it was tough. So we sent the kids about a mile away to their grandmother's house, and they stayed there for a while, off and on, but they were with us. Anyway, I made it through, guys. I made it through. And while I was at the law school, one of my classmates, his dad, was a distinguished criminal defense lawyer. And so I ended up going to his house, and his dad, who I respected, he was a very well-respected criminal defense lawyer. It was he who later on introduced me to Johnny Cochran, who would become OJ's attorney, and I'd get to learn some things from him. But at any rate, I ended up in a scenario, a situation where I shared with the man, I call him Judge Pension because he later on became a judge. And I told him my story. So he says, I'm going to help you in a couple of things. I'm going to give you some suggestions. You can make up your mind what you're going to do. He says, I know you want to be a criminal lawyer. He says, but be a defense attorney. He says, you will learn a whole lot about the system that you won't learn being a prosecutor. So I respected him and took him up on that. He then also took me over to the criminal court building, and we pulled the files from 57, 58, and then from 63, 64 for the man who letting me see what the details were that resulted in the convictions and the cases and how they went for my mother and father. So I have this today even. And so it was a challenge, but I did. So I still was at the law firm. Oh, by the way, I should tell you that once I finished my first year of law school, I went back to the law firm to work as a student lawyer during the summers and part-time in my second and then third year. Ultimately, they gave me an offer, and I went back to work there after I graduated, and I became the first African-American attorney that they hired. But I didn't want to do corporate law. I was nice. I got a chance to meet great people before that as a messenger, but at the law firm, Ray Kroc, chairman and founder of McDonald's, other individuals of major corporations, Allstate, you name them. I was involved with with those people and got to know major recording company owners. So anyway, I didn't want to do that. So I left the law firm 2 years after law school, worked with some guys, and then um, started my own practice in 1980. Criminal defense was primarily. I started doing radio at that time, came up with a concept of a radio show called Know Your Rights, which is spelled Wrights. And so I became known as Attorney Wright on Know Your Rights. I acquired the phone number WRIGHTS, which is 974-4487 from my office. I had my plates on my car, WRIGHTS, so I was branding myself and all of that. So my practice took off, and I did entertainment as well. I did radio and TV because the lady who would ultimately adopt me, I represented her, and she introduced me to other radio people and TV people in Chicago. So I was pretty much involved. I was doing a lot of things. But criminal law was still my passion. I was very good in criminal law. I loved juries. I never lost a jury trial. They used to call me the preaching lawyer. So as I was practicing law in 91 to 93, I would end up divorced from my first wife. We went in different directions. By this time, we had a third child who was born 40 years ago in 1978. And all those kids have gone on, got college education and so forth. But anyway, and I have grandchildren. And then I got married a second time. And that was problematic because the young lady had other ideas with other men, so we split. Well, in the meantime, I went to seminary, 91 to 93, to get a Master of Arts in Religion and got involved in ministry. But I continued practicing law. So they started calling me the preaching lawyer because I would always end my closing arguments with this, God is my witness. Well, I ended up finding myself, as I wrap this up, I want to say that I found myself in a situation where law was okay, and it came to the year 2000. I had gotten married to my current wife, who's my third wife, in 94. And then she and I had our first son, followed by a daughter, followed by a second son, and then finally, 2008, a baby girl who is 10, and I'm 68. So everybody laughs about it, but that's okay. So I have 8 kids, 6 girls, 2 boys, and you see 4 of them on the picture. At any rate, I've done a lot of things, been through a lot of challenges, a lot of adversity, but I always kept pressing forward. I came up with that mnemonic lawyers, which you see if you look in the student lounge. And I'm not going to go over each letter, but if you can go and you can see that. The point of the matter is that I didn't let things stop me. I didn't let things stop me. And so I retired from being a lawyer at 50 years old to teach special education, to run a janitorial company for a company that was nationwide called Service Merchandise. But I did the Illinois version of it, 26 stores. So I did that. I started doing closings for title companies part-time as well. Then finally in 2011, someone brought to my attention this school I had never heard of. They said they're looking for someone to teach business law. The name of the school is Rasmussen. I said, never heard of them. So I did my due diligence and research. Well, I would find out something that made me say, okay, let me take a closer look at them. I found out that the chairman of the board, and he's even to this day, was the former president of Northwestern University, Dr. Henry Binion. And so I ended up applying for the job to teach residentially on campus business law. and I got the job. And then when I got there, I told them, I says, I'm a criminal justice person. So the next semester, they transferred me over to criminal justice and still had me teaching business. But this was residentially. Then they brought to me around 2000, late 12 or 13, that the criminal justice program is going all online. So I had to learn the systems of operating and teaching a class. At that time, we didn't have to do live lectures, but then I began to learn more about how to do that, and I began to enjoy it. So then in 2014, a position opened up for state program coordinator for the School of Justice Studies for Illinois to cover all 4 campuses: Romeoville, Mokina, Tinley Park, Aurora, and Rockford. So I applied for the job, and I was hired for that job. And I became the state program coordinator and full-time at that time. Began teaching 3 classes and working as the state program coordinator. Well, about 2015, they changed the roles to do away with program coordinators, and they said, we're going to make you a full-time teacher again. I was a full-time already, but they're going to add 2 more, take away those 2 hours that I'd use a week for the course position of state program coordinator, and add 2 classes. And since that time, I have been teaching 5 classes, as I do now, of criminal justice. I have had many students in my class who have had issues and challenges, and I've explained to them. I said, I'm here to help you. I'm very empathetic. In fact, they call me Mr. Empathetic or Professor Empathetic. And so students would always say, what do I call you? Dr. Wright, Professor Wright, Mr. Wright? So you can call me Richard or any of those. It doesn't matter. And I explained to each of my students that any challenge that you have, I got a challenge that you know about me that could top that. I said, but here's my whole point. I learned 2 things with that. That if one person did it, I can do it. And I instilled in my students the ability to be confident. I don't care how difficult or how tough. I had tough courses through college and high school. Math was my albatross, especially when you got to that algebra and all of that, but I still went through it. I didn't let anything stop me from accomplishing my goal of becoming a lawyer. And so now I am a hands-on professor when it comes to my students. My students are almost like my kids. Many of my students are friends of mine on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook. If you want to send a friend request, you go to Richard Wright, J.D. And that's where you'll find me on Facebook. I also now do a radio show on a radio station called WVTC. It's an internet radio station. Some students who are on, and on Facebook Live, my show comes on every Friday. What I'm saying to you is this, is that I keep contributing and helping my students and reaching out to my students. 2 of my favorite activities for my students are, 1, attending and seeing my students receive awards at the academic awards, honor roll and or dean's list. But then my favorite of all is when you put on that cap and gown and I'm there to congratulate you and see you and cheer you as you go forth and earning your associates. And now I'm encouraging bachelors. And then there are a few who decide they want to go on to become lawyers. I'm working with a few students that I had from way back, even when I was residentially, that are heading onto law school. The point of the matter is this, guys. I have learned something that I want to close with saying to you. Don't run from a challenge. Just dig in and don't let anyone stop you. Now, let me explain to you who can stop you. There is a song a group called McFadden and Whitehead did. I play it sometime during class at the beginning. Ain't no stopping us now. The point of the matter is this. The one who can stop you, you have never seen them. But if you take a mirror out and look in it, you will see an image. If you look at a picture of you, you'll see an image. That is not 3D. That picture and that one in the mirror has no feelings. But if you take your hand and pinch yourself, any part of your body, the one that says ouch or feels the pain, that's who can stop you. But that is also the one who can drive you. Let me say this. It took me 7 years to get my bachelor's degree because I was raising kids, and sometimes I had to reduce my load in school. And I made it through with honors. But then I made my 3 years of law school. The point of the matter is this. Don't use the exit excuse. Don't quit. Finish. And so I'm going to end this. I thank you all for paying attention to this session. And so I want to give you a key word that you'll need to give me back in the Dropbox. Adversity. Adversity. That's it. And you have your points. But remember, this lecture is a little longer, but it sets the pace for the next 5.5 weeks. I'm still going to be who I am. I'm here for you. So take advantage. So with that, I'm going to say good night. And I will see you wow. Well, I pastor a church, and the church that I pastor, the name of the church is God is Able. You take that. Okay. You will. Just don't. You know what? There's a term that I tell people. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. You ever heard that before? Have you ever heard that? Don't drink the Kool-Aid? Yeah. And what it really means pretty much is don't buy into what others think you are. I have this thing that I share with people, and I say it all the time. Yeah, Jim Jones, that's where it came, because that could be very deadly. That is exactly where that came from. Good. You got it. Here's what I tell people. And this is me talking to everybody. You are not who they could be anybody say you are. You are who God says you are. You are who you want to become. You are who you can become. You are who you will become. Successful. You are a victor and not a victim. That's it. Take that. Chew on that. Meditate on that. Sleep on that. Wake up on that. Act on it every day. After a while, it'll be just like breathing. You won't even have to think about it. You'll take the words of Nike. Do you know the words of Nike? 3 words? Yep. That's it. So I'm going to say good night, and I will see you next week. If you have any questions anytime, you know the procedures. If you didn't hear earlier what I said, you can go back and listen to the early part of the lecture, because I went over everything so you can know what to do. I will not be covering it in detail every week, but I will be covering the material. So good night. Have a great week, and I'll see you hopefully next Tuesday. Now, it's next Tuesday. at 6:30. Okay. Good night. Thank you.